Hi everyone, my name's Rachel. I'm the volunteer officer for the Royal Parks, and thank you so much for joining us tonight on our talk about the Hedgehog survey at Regent's Park. So our speaker tonight is Bryony, who you'll have seen presenting the speakers at some of our previous talks. And Bryony is our volunteer and programs manager, and she's been involved in the Regent's Park Hedgehog survey for 4 years now and has helped manage it for several of those. So she can tell you all about how it works and what we do. So a few quick housekeeping things before we start. There is a Q&A box which you can use to ask any questions throughout the night, and also let us know if you're having any technical issues. It should be a little question mark box at the top or the bottom of your screen. And those will come to us and we can either publish them or not. So if it's a question for Bryony, we will publish it. And then if you see that question and you think, oh yeah, I definitely want to hear an answer to that, you can like that question and we will focus on the questions with the most likes first. You can also pause and rewind the event if you've missed something and you want to quickly catch up. You should have controls to do that along the bottom of your screen, and there should also be a button that says live, and that will jump you back to what's being live broadcast if you want to catch up with us, because obviously you'll be out of sync with the questions and things if you do jump back and forth. And if you are having any technical issues, as I said, you can either use the chat box, or if you can't use the chat box, you can email the volunteering@royalparks.org.uk mailing list. So huge thanks for signing in today for our third talk, I think it is now. And we've been getting some really nice feedback from them, so I hope you enjoy it. So I will just send Bryony up onto the screen now. Okay, Bryony, you're on.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our next talk on hedgehogs. And really, they are one of my absolute favourite things about doing this job. So I hope you enjoy this talk. As a quick disclaimer, I am by no means a real hedgehog expert, and we do have a wonderful hedgehog expert who joins us for the surveys, but I do have a very big love for hedgehogs and for the survey that we do for them. So I'm going to start and talk first about hedgehogs in general, and then I'll go on to the survey that we do. So we actually only have one species of hedgehog in the UK, and it is the West European hedgehog, this little guy on the screen here. So it's one of the UK's most familiar wild animals and the UK's only spiny mammal. And I think it was in 2016, it was voted as the UK's favourite mammal. And I think we can all agree there's no surprise there, because they are just incredibly cute. And I mean, they're kind of very recognisable, and I don't think you can really confuse them with anything else that we have in the UK. But some of their features are that they're usually around 23 centimetres kind of long, up to about 30 really, and they can often weigh around 800 to 1,000 grams if they're a healthy adult. One of their defining features obviously are their spines that run kind of all over their body, and these spines are about 2 to 3 centimetres long. And believe it or not, they're made of keratin, which is the same material that our hair and our nails are made of. And just like our hair, they shed their spines over time, and new ones will grow to replace them. And obviously their spines, that's their main defence when kind of defending themselves from predators, and they'll curl up into a tight spiky ball. And they can do that because there's a muscle that goes around their body which allows them to contract and curl up. And I've heard someone liken it to almost like pulling on a drawstring bag. They kind of curl up like that. And surprisingly, they've actually got quite long legs, but they're usually hidden kind of under their body and under their kind of spikes. But I, for one, have seen them in action on surveys, and those longish legs can actually let them run pretty fast when you're trying to survey them and gather them for data. It can be quite an entertaining situation. So as we know, they kind of are more active at night, so they're out and about in the night, and they've actually got quite poor eyesight, so they really rely on their sense of smell and hearing to navigate and hunt. and you can see their little ears kind of there, just poking out. So it's interesting because a lot, hedgehogs in the UK and across worldwide have almost become a bit of a trend, and you might have seen hedgehogs in memes and on loads of people's pictures, and they're actually, people have started to have them as pets. And actually this species of hedgehog, which are pets, are not the same as the ones that we have as natives. So these ones here, as you can see, are a little bit different. So the colour of them is a bit lighter, they're a bit smaller, and they kind of tend to have more of a pinky nose and pinky features. And this is a wild African pygmy hedgehog. And actually its natural habitat is, in the savannah and grassy areas of West Central and in East Africa. But unfortunately have kind of become a bit of a new trend as a pet. And although it's totally legal to actually own these hedgehogs as a pet in the UK, it's really hard to obviously look after them as they should be done in the wild. So, a lot of charities do kind of err against this trend, and I'm definitely in agreement with that. And actually we could probably spend more time looking after our native species, the one that we've just spoken about, instead. So it's interesting, they've become a bit of a trend, and you can kind of see why, because they are incredibly cute, but what we really want to do is preserve the species that we have in this country. So a little bit more about our hedgehogs. They are hungry little things, and they are generalists. So they usually like to feed on a wide range of things, but the majority of their diet are invertebrates. So creepy crawlers, things without a backbone. And we know that from a lot of scientific studies which have analysed hedgehog poo, is that the most important thing for them in their diet are these invertebrates. And so it's things like worms, beetles, beetle larvae, slugs, caterpillars, earwigs and millipedes are some of their absolute favourites. And some of the kind of more juicier ones, like the slugs and the snails, are really, really important for their diet. But they are also opportunists. So they will take advantage of other food sources, such as carrion, frogs, toads, baby birds, birds' eggs that have fallen. So if you can kind of see here, this is, sorry for those who don't like things that are a bit more gruesome, but this is a little toad foot, and I kind of highlighted it with an almost CSI drawing outline, just so you could actually see that it's there. And these two were taken on our surveys, and this one absolutely refused to let go of its tasty treat that it had come across, and is kind of all rolled up with it inside. So looking at how hedgehog lives its year, you can kind of see that their main active period is kind of from spring through to late autumn, and this is where their courtship and breeding happens, the birth of their young happens, and the young come out of their nests and start building up their fat reserves. And as you can see, at each end of this kind of active period is buffered with times where they must really concentrate on replenishing their fat reserves and kind of eating lots of food. And this one here is particularly important because it builds up their fat reserves for them to go into winter and to go into hibernation. And hedgehogs are seen as true hibernators. So during hibernation, they're not really asleep, but instead they drop their body temperature to match their surroundings and enter a state which is known as torpor. And this allows them to really save a lot of energy, but it also slows down all of their other bodily functions. So it means that normal activity isn't possible. You might actually sometimes see them emerging briefly if it becomes milder in winter or kind of in winter coming up to spring, and so that is possible. And it is known that they actually can move nesting sites throughout that time. So throughout hibernation, that fuel supply that they've spent ages kind of building up is just so important, because that keeps them going through until the spring. So breeding and birthing. So they become sexually mature in their second year of life, and they generally reproduce, or their kind of season of breeding and birthing is between April and September. And kind of like our deer in our parks, they also have what's called a rutting season, and it's particularly the British one is like May to June. That's where there's the greatest activity. And you know, for such small little creatures, they actually make quite a lot of noise. A lot of snuffling and grunting goes into it. And what's interesting is that both males and females can have different mates, and they don't pair up or stay true to those mates over the season. And actually, even in one night, and I know that we've seen hedgehogs kind of on survey nights, we've found males all over the place. So they've really been running around trying to find all of the females on that night. And one of my absolute favourite things about hedgehogs is what their young are called, and they are called hoglets. And I just think that that is incredibly cute, and I think it's a great name. So if you can see here, we've got a few little hoglets tucked in here. And this was actually when I was doing some nest box checks with one of the volunteers, and we found these little babies all snuggled in next to their mum. An important thing to note, which is once we'd seen them, took a quick picture and popped the leaves straight back down, is that if hedgehogs are disturbed with their babies, can really disrupt the mother, and she can either abandon or actually harm her hoglet. So if you do find a situation like this, it's best to quickly pop everything back, as it were, and leave them to it. And actually what we found interesting about this box was that this is the mum here and the little hoglets down here. And there's another hedgehog half sticking their head through the door, trying to get in on a bit of the cosy action. And actually the interesting thing is because we could see their number tags, we actually figured out that this was actually another female who just had come in there to shelter as well. So initially we wondered whether it might be a male and a female, and it might be going against the kind of research about parental care and sticking together, but it was actually just another female trying to get in there on the warmth. So your young hedgehogs will leave the nest when they're around 3 to 4 weeks old and go on foraging trips with their mum. And after around 10 days of foraging with their mother, they've learnt the tricks of the trade, they'll wander off on their own. And I think that these will probably be between a week leading up to 2 weeks old when we found them. So still really little, not very much kind of fur on the face or anything like that. So as I'm sure you can agree, really gorgeous, cute animals who are absolutely wonderful. But unfortunately, as with a lot of biodiversity that we're looking at these days, it is declining and it is at threat. And hedgehogs can be found in both rural and urban areas, but they're facing threats in both areas. And I was just going to go through why they're declining in these areas. So in rural areas, one of the issues is pesticide use. So obviously that has increased over the years, and this widespread use of pesticides obviously has an impact on what hedgehogs eat, so the invertebrates. And if you're reducing what the hedgehogs can eat, then they're going to struggle to find that food and build up those fat reserves that they so badly need. Another thing is larger field sizes. So this has happened a lot more with agriculture, is that fields have almost hedgerows and walls have been taken down and being made into much larger plots, and that does impact on wildlife and hedgehogs, and it just makes them a bit more difficult for hedgehogs to move around the landscape because there aren't as many hedgerows to scoot along and shelter under. Another thing is hedgerow management. So some of the hedgerow management means that it now leads to gappy bases, so a lot more clearing out of under the hedgerows, mowing or using right up to the bases of the hedgerow means that they're not as good for nesting anymore. And just in general, intensive management of pastures with herbicides and fertilizers, again, reducing the amount of invertebrates. So, you know, all things that can be happening in rural areas. Moving on to urban areas, and we know they're there because we go and survey them, is that there are issues here as well. So fragmentation, which can be a really big issue for lots of wildlife and why lots of wildlife is declining, is a really big thing. And that could be due to loads of different things, but it's just basically a loss of connectivity. And that might be an impermeable garden fence or walls, which limits these linkages between these different green spaces. And hedgehogs, although small, do need a relatively large area and can roam up to a mile a night. So really having that connectivity is really important for them. Another thing is lost gardens. I mean, we all live in London and know that having a garden is a luxury and something that's quite amazing to get here. And unfortunately, lots of gardens in urban areas have been lost to car parking, or even a kind of change of substrate in your garden, changing it from grass to either fake grass or concrete or decking, kind of reduces that area that they can forage in and get their natural food. Another one is busy roads. They obviously can cause mortalities, and again they can disrupt dispersal routes for hedgehogs and cause that fragmentation and isolation of hedgehogs. And I guess overall habitat loss is a thing, and kind of like over management of areas, whether it's like taking out loads of scrub and brambly areas, can be really detrimental to nesting habitats. And the thing about hedgehogs is they flourish best when they have a matrix of habitat. So they've got some of that scrub and bramble that they can use to shelter and nest in, but they also do have some kind of more open foraging areas as well. So, over tidy gardening and pesticide use kind of all go together. Putting slug pellets down can obviously kill the invertebrates, and in sequence, maybe the hedgehog will eat them and it can have detrimental effects. Another thing, and something that we sometimes worry about in the parks, are predators. So foxes, badgers, and even less natural predators like domestic dogs, who can also have an impact. And sadly, of course, litter. I did have some not so nice photos of hedgehogs being caught up in litter, but I thought we would keep to the nice photos for now. A problem for all wildlife, as we know. So these are all certainly having an impact on hedgehogs. So that was really just an introduction into hedgehogs in general. As I said, I'm no true expert, and that's why we have our wonderful expert, Nigel. And he's here actually on this picture. This is Nigel. Some of you may know him. He's absolutely amazing, and also used to be the head of ecology for the Royal Parks. So he really has an investment into these hedgehogs. So if you do want more information on hedgehog ecology, there are some really great websites and papers that you can read, and I think Rachel linked them in our last newsletter, but if not, I can link them again. So the next thing I really wanted to talk about was the surveys that we do and the work that we do as the Royal Parks for hedgehogs. And the Regents Park surveys have been running since 2014 now, and they started before my time. And they're really a partnership project. We work with London Zoo, and they started with a really generous donation from a resident who lived in the Regents Park areas. We also work, with these guys, so amazing volunteers, and without volunteers we would not be able to get the data that we do. And also incredible for so many reasons, because they give up their evenings, usually a Friday evening, very early Saturday morning, to go out there and look for hedgehogs. And while most people might think that's a little bit mad, I think it's wonderful and I'm incredibly grateful every time. And look how happy everyone is. Here's me feeling very happy and excited for the night to come. So why are we studying them? Why did we decide to study them? Well, they are the last known breeding population of hedgehogs in central London. And before we started surveying them, no previous studies had been done on them before. And we really wanted to find out how many hedgehogs are present, find out where they live, what habitats they use for feeding and nesting, and really provide evidence-based management recommendations for the park managers, but also that could be utilised elsewhere for other managers of urban open spaces. And we wanted to engage with volunteers and the local community in this really kind of exciting project. Wanted to look at new techniques that we could use and really investigate this little isolated population and try and plan for the future. And I think we're now coming into year 8 of the project, so it's been going for a while. So what do these surveys involve? How do you even survey for hedgehogs? I get asked this question a lot by my friends who think I'm a little bit crazy for doing this. So surveys usually take place in May and September, and they take place over 2 weekends, and we have 2 shifts per night. And we usually have up to, I think, 40 volunteers per shift, which is absolutely amazing. And we cover 8 zones in Regent's Park. So this zone here is so big that we actually have to split it into 2. And we also cover the zoo up here. So we have a wonderful team from the zoo who go out and survey for us. So our teams go off in their groups of 5 or 6, and it's usually 4 or 5 volunteers, and they are joined by a supervisor. And those supervisors are often volunteers who've been with us from the start, who know the methodology, who know the surveys inside out, and they lead those groups and manage those groups as they walk around the parks. So these areas are pretty big, but we have set walking routes which the volunteers follow through the night, so they can kind of keep following the routes and trying to look for hedgehogs. So we've got to cover a lot of ground, and that's why we need all of these volunteers. So how do you even find a hedgehog in the middle of the dark, in the middle of the night? Well, we use 2 main methods to find them. And the first one is spotlighting. So we have some really high quality torches, and it really is just visually searching for hedgehogs with that torch and kind of just sweeping the torch over your area. And volunteers usually space out, and you kind of systematically sweep as you go along your walking route. And actually, surprisingly, these torches can reach quite far, and it's amazing what you can see. The second thing are our thermal imaging cameras, and I have to say they are most definitely, I think, people's favourite part or piece of equipment to use when they're on the survey. And these are fantastic and can pick up the body heat of these little hedgehogs. Bit of a disclaimer though, you can also pick up lots of other things on there, and the amount of times I have walked up to a leftover piece of rubbish or can thinking it was a hedgehog because it still retained the heat from the day, and been very disappointed that it's just an empty Coke can. It happens a lot. We also have another, one of the areas that we survey has lots of pine trees, and the pine cones that fall off and scatter around the tree are very deceiving, and the amount of times that I think I found a hedgehog but it's actually a sneaky pine cone is ridiculous. The third way, which I haven't put up here, in which is we don't find as many hedgehogs this way, is just by sound. You really can tell the sound of a hedgehog moving through the thicker vegetation, and sometimes it is really just great to just stand and listen for some sounds, and it can definitely alert you to hedgehogs moving around. So that's another way. I just wanted to put up here a little recording of a hedgehog on the infrared. And this is a little hedgehog who's foraging around on some shorter grass. And so here you must say, oh my gosh, it obviously looks like a hedgehog. How can you ever, you know, mix up a can of Coke with a hedgehog? But when they are just sat still, it is incredibly hard to tell the difference. You can actually see in the background here, there's a fox as well. So we do also note down any fox sightings that we've had as well when we're on the survey. So we've found the hedgehog, great. Now we need to think about what information do we collect? What information will be useful for us to kind of understand this population? So the first thing that we note down is, where have we found this hedgehog? So we have little GPS handheld devices, and we take down the GPS coordinates and note down which zone we're in and what general area description, if we know the name of the area, if it's a, you know, Marylebone Green or Gloucester Gate or something like that. Just in case the GPS coordinates fail us slightly, at least we have some idea of the area that it's in. The next thing that we do is note down, how did we find that hedgehog? Was it with the torch? Was it with the infrared? Or was it just with sound or sight? And that's really important for us to kind of understand the best ways to find the hedgehogs. And you will find that the infrared cameras are really great for being in kind of bigger open spaces, because they'll pick up that little heat spot really far away. Whereas sometimes a torch is really useful for going through more kind of scrubby areas. So it is important for us to use, you know, a range of tools. The next thing we do is we tag the hedgehogs. So this is how we can kind of keep an eye on the population. We can see where the hedgehogs move, or, you know, where they turn up next year, and whether they're hopefully still with us. So tagging a hedgehog. And loads of people always ask me, how do you tag a hedgehog? That must be impossible. But actually here we've got it in action, and this person is popping a tag on the hedgehog, and I will show you in a bit closer up. So what we do is we pop 6 tags in this area on the hedgehog, randomly kind of spaced. And little tags look like this, and it's almost kind of looks like the lining of wires, you know, the plastic lining of like electrical wires that you get. And each one has a little number on it. So this little hedgehog will have got 6 tags, all with a number 5 on them. And as I said earlier, they can shed their spines. So we've kind of found that having 6 on there, kind of distributed roughly in the same area, but with a bit of gap, means that they won't hopefully lose all of their tags at the same time. And by the time we come to survey them the next time, they'll have retained the majority of their tags. If we find a hedgehog that's already been tagged before, we'll check the number of tags and we'll top back up to 6 if we need to. And if we haven't found a hedgehog before, well, it's really exciting. It's a new hedgehog to the survey, and we'll pop a new number on it and make a note of it. And this is really one of the most important parts for making sure that we can manage and understand this population. And actually it's you know, a technique which our team have written an academic paper on, and has been shared with other groups who do this kind of research. So it's been really helpful and proved really successful. So the next thing we want to do is we want to check if they are healthy and happy, and you know, if they're getting enough food. And to do that, we'll look at the weight and their circumference. Again, how do you weigh a hedgehog? How do you measure its circumference? All strange things to do, but this is how. So we weigh them like so, and this is Nigel, our expert, and actually you can see the hedgehog is down here just waiting patiently to be weighed. And we have these tote bags here and these measuring scales. We actually measure the weight of the tote bag first, and then we will gently place, very gently place the hedgehog in this tote bag and weigh it. And I must stress that when we do these surveys, we really want to cause as little disturbance to the hedgehogs as possible, because it obviously might be quite stressful to be, handled by these large beings. But everything we do is done to a total minimum to keep them as safe as possible. So it's done gently and as quickly as possible so they can go on their way again. And this is somebody measuring their circumference. And what you really want to see from a healthy hedgehog is a nice round body shape, a full body shape, to show that they're getting loads of food. And what you don't want to see is them being more oblong shape, and that's when you want to think about, are they dehydrated? Are they not very well? Are there other signs that they might not be feeling too good? So nice rounded hedgehog is what you really want to see when you find them. The next bit is we want to sex them, so we want to understand the kind of how many males and how many females we have in this population. Obviously, to be a viable population, they need to be breeding, and we need to have, a nice mix of both sexes. And this is how you tell them apart. But before you get to this, you actually have to try and get a good view, and you have to unroll a hedgehog. And what I'm annoyed at myself that I didn't do is I should have popped the video in of Nigel, our hedgehog expert, showing how you unroll a hedgehog. But you essentially take them in your hands and you gently rock them, and you'll find that their little nose will pop out first, and you pop your hand under, and then their bum will roll out underneath. And I swear Nigel just has the magic touch, because I swear he goes near them and they just pop straight open for him. And once you've unrolled them, you can get a really good look. And as you can tell, when you look, it is actually quite obvious. So on the male, the tail and the penis are like quite far away, and there's quite a distance between them. Whereas on the female, here it's all kind of quite close together. So it is really quite obvious when you unroll them and look at them. And again, the safety and kind of health of the hedgehogs is the most important thing. So if you're not having any luck at unrolling them, we do just leave them and let them get on with it if they're not happy to be unrolled. But it's actually quite amazing feeling when they do just unroll gently for you. The next thing, again, we also need to look at the health of them. So looking for visible parasites or injuries. Are there any leg injuries? Do they have all of their toes? Are there any ticks or fleas? So you can find a couple of ticks on them, and that's actually perfectly normal. The thing that you need to worry about is if there are a large amount of ticks on them, and that means that they're probably quite vulnerable and maybe a bit unwell. But a couple of ticks we wouldn't be too worried about. I think hedgehogs sometimes have a reputation for having fleas, and some people think, little flea bags, but they do have fleas, but they are actually hedgehog specific. So if a flea then jumped onto you or a pet, it would actually very quickly fall off because you're not what it's after. And we'd also look for stuff like fly strike or maggots, which can be a lot more serious. If we see anything that we are not happy with and we don't like and we're concerned about, as I said, we work closely with the zoo and we have them on call. So we'll have them on call, and either there'll be a vet who can come and collect the hedgehog for us, or we will take it in and look after it and then take it to the zoo at the end of the survey. So we do really, if there's something, amiss, we will take them to the zoo, which is handily right next door. And the last thing that we record on this survey is the habitat that we found them in. So for us, it's really interesting to see where they're out and about at night, whether it's scrub that we find them in, or whether it's, cut grass where they're foraging. And, we do tend to find a lot more on the cut grass. And that's probably because A, they're out foraging at night, but also B, it's much easier to find a hedgehog on shorter grass than it is through the the bramble and hedges. And I know that Rachel and I, when we last did the survey, definitely spent about 20 to 30 minutes walking around a nettle and bramble patch, because we were so sure that we'd heard a hedgehog, seen a red blob on the infrared camera, and it kept moving, but it's impossible to find it. So I still feel a bit irked that we didn't find out what that was, but I'm sure it was a hedgehog. So when we've got all of this data, and the volunteers are giving it back to us, and I've inputted it and sent it off to John, who is our data guy and also comes and helps out with the surveys. He will plot it and pop it into all sorts of different diagrams for us to look at. And I've put a few of those in tonight just to kind of give a bit of an overview. So as you can see, the population has, had quite a lot of ups and downs, and here we are here last year, at the end of last year, autumn 2020, when we did the survey, and we found 20 adults 20 hogs in the survey, which bit of a lower number than we would have wanted. However, I'm quite positive that a reason for this is because we really had to change our survey effort and how many of us could be out due to the pandemic. So the plan is to go back out again in May, hopefully, and be able to really do a good survey and really kind of try and get those numbers up and find all of those hedgehogs. And I mean, as you can see here, we did have quite a big dip here, and that was in spring 2016. And Nigel and John really think that there may have been a small local extinction in one area. But the positive thing is you see that they can recover, even in such a small isolated spot. So there, it does fluctuate, but we're hopeful that they're relatively stable still, and we're gonna keep looking after them. We're going to keep making management changes to help look after them. And as you can see, you'll always probably have a bit of a higher number in autumn, where it tends to peak, and that's because you'll have hopefully had some really healthy litters of hedgehogs over the summer. So just to show you a little bit more of the distribution across the parks and how that's changed across the years. So what we've found is their hotspots have changed, which is really interesting, and we're not totally sure why. And I've only got from 2017 to 2020, but what I do know is in the first few years of the survey, this area here was where the hotspot was. And as you can see, in 2017, it's really quite bare, and we've only got a couple of sightings here. So this bit used to be the hotspot. This whole section here as well was one of our biggest hotspots, and up in the zoo car park here, a really unlikely place we first thought for hedgehogs to enjoy and prosper. But up here was a hot spot, and down over these greens here. As you can see, it has started to change a little bit. Going to 2018, and we don't have anything here. Those two little sightings have been lost, but we're starting to have more in zone 5. So the distribution is changing and they are moving. But then we look here, and the zoo car park doesn't seem to have as many hedgehogs anymore, and that was always a bit of our, gold at the end of the rainbow. Kind of, we knew we'd always find some here, so they're not there anymore that we can find. But what's interesting is this year is that we found some hedgehogs again in zone 1, and the sports pitches in particular, and roving across the sports pitches, seem to be really popular. And we're not sure whether that's to do with some management changes. I know that our park manager has been making sure that the sports pitches still were watered, and that means that invertebrate population is going to be protected, and hopefully there's more foraging here for them. So it's a changing picture and one that we're keeping an eye on. But the hope is that we can get out in May this year and really take another look at what's going on with the hedgehogs, see if they've moved around again in the zones, and see if with a full survey again we can get a better picture. And obviously 2020 has been a bit of a difficult year all round, so we're hoping it hasn't been a difficult year for the hedgehogs too, and we're hoping that 2021 will show us some bigger numbers. So I said that, you know, one of the reasons why we've done these hedgehog surveys is because we really want to put into practice evidence-based park management techniques to help look after these hedgehogs. So I'm just going to go over a few things that we've done. So one of the things is to let grass grow long at the base of hedges and have these kind of strips going down the hedgerows. And that really provides them with a bit of cover and kind of before they get to the hedgerows and those nesting sites. We've also made an effort to not clear leaves from under the hedges or from within shrub beds, because again, that's nesting material and it's also cover and protection for them. So, you know, these, I think in total it's been about 5 kilometres plus of these 1 metre wide strips along the hedgerows. So that's really great, and it's stuff that we're continuing to do and look at where we can implement these things. Another thing that we've done is new meadow areas. So if you're familiar with Regent's Park, you may have seen a few new meadow areas popping up. And meadow areas are amazing for invertebrates and their food source. So we're really trying to encourage suitable habitats for their food source, but also for them as well. As I said, hedgehogs love a matrix of habitats, so having all of these different habitats is really beneficial to them. Obviously, meadows still need to be cut and other areas of grasses still need to be cut. So our contractors, we work with them additionally to walk and finger search any suitable habitat that they are required to cut down within their meadow management. And it's something that we train the contractors on as well, what to look for and how to manage areas in a hedgehog sensitive way. So it's something that is really important and we embed in with our contractors as well. Another thing that we do is we are trying to leave more dead wood in situ and also create more log piles. So dead wood is an amazing habitat for invertebrates, so for their food source, also can be areas for them to shelter. But log piles as well are particularly important because they also can make great nesting habitats as well. So loads of little things, and you may notice these things if you go to Regent's Park just starting to pop up here and there. One thing that we realised might be an issue for hedgehogs not being in certain areas and might make them more vulnerable to local extinctions was the permeability and how those hedgehogs could actually move around the parks. So what we've tried to do is a programme of making adjustments to these fences, making them more permeable, just like by putting in these little holes here, and it's as simple as cutting off this bar here and re-popping it up here. Also, the next thing is to look at our metal and chain link fences and make them more permeable and just give those hedgehogs more opportunities to be able to move between these areas. Another thing is that actually hedgehogs are incredibly good swimmers, which is something that I definitely didn't know until I worked on this survey and saw a hedgehog plop off into the water body and swim away just out of my grasp. But although they're good swimmers, if they cannot get out of that water body, then like most people, it's really dangerous for them and they can drown. So we've made a real effort to ensure that there are exit points and slopes in water bodies that have sheer edges, like this is the little kids boating pond in Regent's Park. So really giving them, if they want to go in there, their access in and out to make it a lot more safer. And we've been putting in some wildlife ponds that were created just last winter to kind of create some more water availability for them when the weather is a little bit drier. Another project that we do are nest boxes, and these are to try and give hedgehogs another space to be safe and go and nest. And as I showed you the picture earlier of the hoglets, they are used, which is fantastic. And I think we have about 55 of these across Regent's Park, and we also check these twice a year to see if they're being used and to see what their condition is. And I think we found a couple of hedgehogs using them when we did them at the end of last year. And as well as protecting the hedges that we have now and kind of making them more sheltered, we have been planting more hedgerows. And as you can see here, there's a hedgerow here, but it's almost creating like a double hedgerow for the hedgehogs. And these are some of our hedgehog heroes who are helping to plant up that hedgerow. So there are loads of things that we've been doing, and there are, you know, looking at what we plant, making sure that it's wildlife friendly, making sure that our shrub beds have got loads of different layers for the hedgehogs, and so that they're wildlife friendly as well. But we're continuing, and we're always thinking of new ways to try and improve this environment for our hedgehogs. So lastly, I guess, is what can you do if you want to help out our little spiny friends? So one thing that you can do is try and make your garden as wildlife friendly as possible. And if you make your garden nice for any wildlife, then that's going to be beneficial to all of the wildlife. So if you make your garden good for invertebrates, that will be good for birds and hedgehogs and other small mammals as well. Leaving little bits that are unmown, and as I said, almost trying to create a mini matrix of environments in your garden is really beneficial. However, if you do that and there isn't anywhere for that hedgehog to get to your garden, then it may all be for no good, well, apart from all the other wildlife that will benefit that can fly in. So creating access is really important, and whether that's just a small little cut in your fence or wall to connect to another green space or another garden, then that's great. And it might be something that you ask all of your neighbours to do as well, so there's that corridor for those hedgehogs. And I actually really like this little poster that I found of this hedgehog, and just saying 13 centimetre square gap in the bottom of your fence will help hedgehogs who travel around a mile a night. And I enjoy the find the gap little sign there. So that's something that's really important and really encouraged if you are lucky enough to have a garden. Another thing to do is to just check potentially hazardous spaces before either strimming or bonfires. So any leaf piles, log piles, your compost bin even, are all places where hedgehogs may like to go in and nest, and therefore just checking them can be really beneficial. Having a little hedgehog house in your garden, a safe space for them to nest or have their young or just to recuperate, is always wonderful, and you can find them online. It's always good to have a hedgehog house that has an entrance which they almost have to kind of weave through to stop predators being able to get in as well. Another thing is food and water. So you can, I would always advise having some kind of water in your garden for birds, for small mammals, which is shallow and has pebbles in, so they can't get hurt in it. But water is always good, especially with the hot summers and springs that we've been having. But also food, you can put food out, but always be aware that it should be supplementary. So if you're making your garden wildlife friendly and there are loads of invertebrates for them to eat, that's great, but you can supplement, you can supplement, and there's even hedgehog specific food that you can find online. Just do not give them milk or bread. Hedgehogs are actually lactose intolerant, and bread is not good for them either. And the last thing that I would say is, if you want to know more, read up and support charities and petitions that can help us protect hedgehogs in the future. And there are loads of great charities which look at hedgehogs obviously ourselves, the Royal Parks, the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, and the People's Trust for Endangered Species are all really good. So please read up if you want to know more and support those charities as well. So that is everything from me, and here is me out on survey with a little hedgehog, and I believe this is one of my first surveys, so I'm looking pleased as punch to find a little hedgehog. So thank you very, very much for listening, and I hope it was enjoyable, and I think Rachel is going to ask me some questions.
Okay, that was great. Thank you so much, Bryony. Yeah, we have got some questions come through, so let me see. So we had one that says, sorry to ask this, but just thinking about it, how do hedgehogs mate? Does he climb on top of her flattened spines, or does she roll over onto her back?
Well, you got it right the first time. So he climbs onto her and she flattens her spines. So yeah, absolutely. She doesn't roll over onto her back. Yeah, he kind of climbs on her and flattens her spines. So yeah, good question though.
Yeah, I think there's a joke that's how does hedgehogs mate? Carefully.
Yeah, absolutely.
So somebody else has asked, how has the HS2 work in the zoo car park affected the population there?
Difficult question. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously caused some disruption, and it would be hard to think that it hasn't had an impact. We have found less hedgehogs in there in the last couple of years, although when I was teaching A-level students statistics, I would always remind them to say that correlation doesn't always equal causation. So we have to be careful around that, but I can't help but think and draw conclusions that it must have had some sort of impact and would have disrupted them a little. And that could be part of the reason why we're not finding them as much in there, which is a shame. And we did try for a long time to stop the lorry park and HS2 taking over that car park, which unfortunately we did not win. So yeah, I'm sure it has had some form of detrimental impact to a certain degree, definitely. Yeah.
Was there a bit of mitigation for that at all, or have I got that
Yeah,
wrong?
so there was some mitigation and putting some hedgehog tunnels under the roads to try, and specially designed to try and if the hedgehogs did want to move out, that they could safely move across to the park. And then also they have helped with some of the management, so rows, and there have obviously been some management that they've had to do and specific guidelines that they've had to follow when carrying out their work. So we have done as much as possible as we can with HS2 being involved. But yeah, it's a tough one to answer definitively. But I'm sure any disturbance is not great for them.
Yeah. So I saved this one for last because it's quite sort of philosophical almost, which was, does a hedgehog actually do any good, in inverted commas, apart from eating up the slugs and snails? So I guess sort of what's their place in the ecosystem, I suppose.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm no ecosystem engineer, but as with everything, and I say this, and this is usually my argument when I'm talking about invertebrates, and are wasps actually useful? But everything has its place, and as soon as one thing is removed, then issues start to happen. So yeah, they're part of the food web, and they are part of natural pest control. So yeah, they do definitely have their place. I'm not sure of any other major ecological benefits to like the landscapes or anything. Rachel, can you think of anything? But I think really they're just part of the food web, and basically a natural pest control.
Yeah, because they eat more than slugs and snails, don't they? They isn't it that they don't like those as much, and they roll them on the ground to get the slime off?
Yeah,
isn't it a bit of a myth that that's their favourite food?
Yeah, they're good for eating larvae and beetle larvae and stuff, so they're quite good to have them in your gardens.
Yeah. And there's the argument as well that Hugh Warwick makes, that he says the hedgehog is the most important creature in the world because it's a really unusual, almost magical thing that, for some people anyway, maybe obviously not so much in London, that you can see in your back garden, and that can spark a love of nature in you, in sort of children, that will last for a lifetime, and they'll grow up and be campaigners for wildlife. And I think I've forgotten the name of his book, but he's a author who has a book in which he makes the argument that hedgehogs are.
And you definitely need those flagship species that kind of ignite that passion in people. And I can honestly say that I do not think I will ever get bored of going out and doing hedgehog surveys. And every time you find a hedgehog, it's just as exciting as the last time. And I still can't stop, being a typical like, oh, they're so cute. So yeah, they're wonderful. And yeah, I know a few hedgehog heroes were on the call. So thank you to you guys for doing all the hard work as well.
Okay, yeah. And I would say long before I worked for the Royal Parks, I went out and volunteered with the hedgehogs, and it was a very exciting time. It was very fun.
And hopefully we will be doing surveys in May, so keep your eye out for that if you do want to get involved. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for a full and proper survey this year. So
yeah, I guess we should probably say, while they are often quite oversubscribed, if people are not hedgehog heroes and would like to get involved,
it's our most popular opportunity for sure, and you can kind of understand why. But if you are interested, we're still happy. If you're interested in working, going out from midnight to 4 a.m, then we will gladly have you.
Yeah, and it's just email us in the volunteering inbox to find out more, right? Yeah, absolutely. And there's a special mailing list for it. Okay, I think that's all our questions then, unless anybody else wants to send anything in. But thank you very much. That was a really nice talk. It was really informative. We've got a comment saying, "Great talk, Bryony. I love being a hedgehog hero."
That's Lisa. Yeah, she is fab. Lisa volunteers for everything. She's great.
So thank you very much, and I guess we'll leave it there. This was recorded, so we'll be sending out the link to view the recording later on. But thank you very much, and I hope you all enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you very much all. I hope to see you all soon. Goodbye.